Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third installment of our virtual Digi-Live series on how data and cloud are changing business fundamentals. We're excited to share some real examples how data and cloud initiatives are driving positive business outcomes in the face of COVID. And I am Jonathan Bigelow, CEO of CDOTrends, your host for today's Digi-Live session. Just a quick note on CDOTrends. We're now in our fourth year as a website, newsletter, and events company. We launched in January 2018 with about 3,000 readers. And over the last 3 years, it's really grown phenomenally, serving the Chief Digital and Data Officer community in Asia. We've got over 27,000 members now and have three distinct websites. We've got a CDOTrends.com, data science and AItrends.com, a bit more technical on the data side of things, and HR and digitaltrends.com. There are hundreds of stories on the website and in the newsletters, case studies, interviews on Asian companies like yourselves. So I do hope you have a chance to visit the website and our newsletters regularly, and of course, our events as well. Today, we'll hear from 10 digital and data experts. You can ask questions through the chat function whenever you want. And we do have special prizes, so do make sure you participate with those questions because we'll be awarding prizes at the end of each session for the best question, okay? We also have award-winning musicians who will be playing between the sessions. We're very excited to support these great talented professionals who just don't have much of a chance to play during COVID. So hope you enjoy the intervals with some great live music. I also hope you get some really strong insights from today that are actionable and people you can follow up with afterwards as well. I do indeed need you to know that today's event would not be possible without the kind support of Fujitsu, Palo Alto Networks, and VMware as our sponsors. These are all companies who really act as partners in your digital and data journey. So I hope you'll consider touching base with them to see how they might help with some of your needs. And also thanks to all of you in the Chief Digital and Data Officer community in Asia Pacific for joining today. Really, really appreciate it. And now, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our Editor-in-Chief of CDOTrends, Winston Thomas, who will be the moderator for the next two sessions. Winston?
Thank you, Jonathan. And could we go to the normal screen? Thank you everyone for coming for this panel discussion. This is the first of the two panel discussions that we will have. As Jonathan has highlighted, we will be talking about cloud and data, which is getting to be a very important topic, especially when companies are going to look to recover and also drive agility and resilience. So those two topics always comes out whenever we write stories. And this session, we'll be looking at an important idea in terms of multi-cloud and how multi-cloud drives business agility, as well as the concept of decentralization, where multi-cloud plays a part in decentralization. So in this discussion, we will have three people who will be joining me as panelists. We will also have a speaker in the middle of a panel discussion to actually set the framework for the second half of the discussion. So let me first introduce my panelists. We have Vicky Abhishek, Group Chief Technology Officer, Bottling Investment Group and Asia Pacific Group at the Coca-Cola Company. Next, we have Kang Nguyen Trieu. Sorry, my Vietnamese name pronunciation is not that good. He is Group Chief Architect at Accor. We have also Adrian Hia, Country Manager for Singapore at VMware. So good morning, folks, and thanks for joining for the panel discussion. And maybe we can just start out with a light and generic sort of question by just stating what we are looking at in terms of the purpose for multi-cloud strategy. So maybe Abhishek, I can ask you, what drives you to pursue a multi-cloud strategy?
Sure. I mean, there are there are multiple things, right? One of the objectives is to also give agility to the business, right? Move from a fixed cost structure to a more business cycle matching flexible OpEx structure, right? Why multiple clouds? I think there's always that it's a little bit of a sourcing strategy as well, right? You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket and then then pray that nothing happens. There are also the ways in which we are looking at evaluating different partner clouds for different strengths. So match those strengths and move them accordingly. But underlying all of these big benefits, the need is to kind of get into a modern platform-based, architecture, which you can scale with the cycle of the business, or the products and the services which we offer in different markets, and keep us more nimble as an organization from an infrastructure perspective, right? So that's where our thinking of cloud or multi-cloud strategy predominantly originates from. And of course, keeping data secure, keeping the company safe and compliant. And protect the brand and protect our business data. It's definitely additional requirements on that, right? On top of all these business drivers.
Thank you. Shall I call you Vicky or Abhishek?
Yeah, I go with Vicky, so
okay.
That's fine.
Okay. So thanks, Vicky. And Kang, from an hotel group perspective, and I'm sure the hospitality market is going through a tremendous sort of change, or sort of an introvert look into what actually it means. So I'm just wondering how multi-cloud has plays a part in Accor.
Yeah, so actually to spice up, I think, a little bit the debate, I would say that we are not actually really into multi-cloud. We are not proponent of multi-cloud strategy. The reason why is that when you start to go to multi-cloud, you start also to dilute the expertise that you need to have on multiple clouds. And as a matter of fact, even before joining Accor, I was more into e-commerce companies. And when you look at all these companies, and even Netflix, Zoom, and so forth, their strategy is more to focus on one cloud and make the best of it. And so in Accor, it does not mean that we are not multi-cloud, but we are more multi-cloud by necessity. Meaning what? Meaning that because we have a worldwide footprint, in some places where we operate, like Russia, like China, or even Indonesia, because of the topic of data sovereignty, then sometimes you don't really have the choice, because some cloud providers, typically China, I think we all know that China is very specific. You cannot completely rely on that. So that would be the reason why we would go multi-cloud. And another reason is more, sometimes in some domains of the enterprise, it could make sense actually to kind of put a bit of a different cloud provider. Typically, I'm thinking about for many companies about corporate IT. And if you are tightly with Microsoft Office 365 and all the suite of Microsoft Office, it could make sense that some of your workload goes in Azure, even if for some of the other core business, you choose AWS or Google Cloud, because it's your preferred cloud provider.
Okay. I mean, Kang, you came out with good points in terms of diluting the expertise. I think that is one that resonates with a lot of interviews that I've done in terms of multi-cloud, what the hurdles are. And then we can also look at it in terms of the language, because multi-cloud, when you go to IaaS, infrastructure as a service, then we have to make sure that we have the proper language that goes across different clouds. So that becomes a struggle. So Adrian, as a solution provider, I'm sure you see all the struggles. How are you actually helping companies to drive their multi-cloud strategies?
So Vincent, maybe I will just break my quick comments into two parts. Of course, I'm sure I hope everyone is familiar with VMware. So we from an on-prem perspective, at least based on the last report, we probably have about 90 to 91% of all workload, right, on-prem actually on VMware. So for the past 3 years, 4 years, really music to my ears when Vicky and Kang mentioned about Azure, about AWS, about Google, about Ali Cloud in China. Kang, you mentioned. Actually, we do have this multi-cloud pitching, right, or this strategy for the past 3 years, right? So from VMC on AWS, VMware Cloud on AWS, to AVS, Azure VMware Services, to GCVE, Google Cloud VMware Engine, to VMC on Ali Yun, to VMC or VMware Cloud on IBM Cloud, IBM Soft Layer. Likewise, if you're talking about OCVS, Oracle Cloud VMware Services, actually these are all capabilities that we have built across the multi-cloud. Like what Vicky and Kang we have mentioned, we have helped many customers to move their workload from on-prem to the cloud. That was the first step. When they went to the cloud, they saw the power of the cloud, but yet they saw the capabilities of each of the hyperscaler. For example, Microsoft is good at, let's say, deep learning, and you see Google really good at data mining. You see Azure, like what Kang mentioned, that can really run very efficiently on Microsoft services, so on and so forth. Then you start to see workload moving from on-prem to the cloud and moving from cloud to cloud. After you do all the rendering and the testing and all ready, interestingly, you actually get pushed back on-prem for production because of data sovereignty, this data residency, laws, regulation. So when people are moving the workload up to the cloud, it's actually for processing and rendering. But when we really come to production, you want to put the application and the data nearer to the user, whether it's in Indonesia, in China, in Singapore, Australia, Sydney, Tokyo. And that is where you see by just pressing one button, in this case, if in the audience here is familiar with this thing called vMotion, where VMware has done this really well. By pressing of one button, you move the workload from on-prem to the cloud. You move from cloud to cloud, and by pressing one button, you bring it from cloud and back to on-prem. I think that's the beautiful part of what VMware has done. We have spent investment, right, to make this work, spend time to make sure that we get our software to be able to run all the IaaS, Winston, that you mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. And I'll go to Vicky and Kang to highlight what Adrian has actually mentioned and to see from their perspective how it is. But I just want to remind the audience, we want to actually hear from you as well in terms of questions. We want this to be an engaging session. So we actually have 3 prizes just to highlight that. We have e-vouchers for the 3 valid questions from the audience to the panelists. So please feel free to send in your questions through the Q&A panel that you see at the bottom. We also will select the best question, but the panelists will select the best question, and we will also give a prize for that. So don't worry if there's more than 3 questions. And we also have poll questions, and there'll be a lucky draw that will be attached for anybody who's participating in the poll. And we will get in touch with you later on after the sessions in regards who won the prize. Now, just going back to Vicky, Adrian was saying about how easy it is to move workloads, and VMware has put a lot of effort and probably investment into ensuring that. From your perspective, moving workloads, what are your challenges? Kang has mentioned about also expertise, but I'm looking at it from a technical perspective. What are your challenges that you face now?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, one of the things with multi-cloud strategy and perhaps cloud strategy in general, right? As Kang said, and I agree on that part, is fundamentally you have to reskill the team and build that core architecture and knowledge capability in-house while you leverage the scale with our partners and you know, on a project engagement basis or on a longer term operation support kind of arrangements, right? But you can't can't think about doing it without building that internal capability. So I really agree with what Khan said, and then that's the core architecture, the core engineering, and the skill set should be developed in-house at a scale which depends on the requirements of individual businesses, right? Some may have larger teams, smaller teams, centralized, multiple locations. That all is acceptable, and there can be variances. Coming back to your question, right? Focusing on challenges between moving, administrating multiple clouds, right? Again, the idea is, or the core premise is, you can move seamlessly from cloud A to cloud B or partner A to partner B, right? But I would say even before we get there, we need to be very, very clear. Why are we making choices to go to a certain cloud for a certain type of application or a requirement, right? And while most of the offers right now, from a commercial and technical capability standpoint, between the big 3-4 cloud service providers globally are very, very similar in nature. They're providing IaaS, PaaS services, middleware services, which are fairly comparable. Names may be different and sometimes very new and take you by surprise, but they still are at the core of it. They're still doing the same things. So doing load transfer or workload transfer between clouds, the key part is to keep the data and integrations seamless. So even move the data, definitely that's always a big part of moving from cloud A to cloud B. But the second piece of it is also, how does that data integrate with your rest of the enterprise applications or your other systems which are not there or which were there earlier and now you're kind of building up there, right? So to me, those are the areas where we spend a lot more time thinking carefully and making the right choices upfront, as well as during the time of migrations as well. I also want to leave one more point on this, and just to add on to what Adrian said as well. The other piece is partner clouds. So when we talk about hybrid clouds, it's not only the cloud service providers, right? There are companies like Workday, ServiceNow, and there's so, I'm just naming them, but there are so many of those. They bring in partner cloud capabilities, and then you do Cloud Connect with them. You kind of bring only a certain amount of data and application integration for one or two specific areas. So even if you are in a single cloud environment, so to speak, theoretically, you are essentially working with multiple cloud service providers through your partner clouds as well. So I think all of us end up working in a hybrid multiple cloud environment. It's just that how we define it and how do we manage it on an ongoing basis is a little different.
Thank you, Vicky. Kang, you mentioned earlier that you will only be doing multi-cloud by necessity, not by choice. I can understand your argument. There is a question from the audience that is from when moving workloads from on-prem to cloud and cloud to cloud. One of the main challenges is if the applications are cloud native, how do you actually move such workloads? And could you explain from your perspective, how would you actually handle or answer this?
Well, I think if the application is already cloud native, I would say that it already kind of solves 80% of the problem, because being cloud native means that typically then it's much easier to organize the migration. Then you just need to enter the migration of the data. Probably if you want to reduce the time of interruption, then you have different strategies actually to make some kind of progressive migration. I think the biggest issue is rather more actually on the legacy applications which are not cloud ready, and that's where actually even with approaches like containerization, it can prove that there can be some challenge, usually because more also on the dependencies that you have. In that, let's say that you want to move your central reservation system that we use in Accord to the on-premise to the cloud. The fact is that we have maybe almost 100 other systems which are integrated with this central reservation system, which can pose the question of, okay, how do you make the connectivity between on-premise and cloud, ensuring security and so forth. So that's where today, I think in our journey to cloud, we start to have some good, I would say, first initiatives. And what we are probably going to do, and I would say a bit thanks to COVID-19, is to now structure a more governance about our way to go to the cloud. And that should accelerate the approach. And
that was an interesting point, Kang, that you brought in terms of containerization. And I will go to Adrian on that concept. But there is a question from the audience. Is containerization a must for a journey to cloud at this moment? Or I would extend it. Is it a must for a multi-cloud environment where you're talking about portability?
Yeah. So I think probably I would say, is it a must? I don't know if it's a must, and I think it really depends on the application. But I think that it definitively is an enabler in many cases because you reduce the need of refactoring at some point, which obviously has some investment cost, which so really depends, I think, on the application. And obviously containerization, if you are thinking from going from one cloud to the other, is also something that that probably is a good answer. But again, I think to Vicky's point, I would question, why do you? I think you need to go to the cloud first, even thinking before kind of playing around with multi-cloud. And again, I think if we look at Netflix, Zoom, all the big leaders in e-commerce, they made the choice to have I would say, a predominant cloud, because before you can take full advantage of a cloud, I think you have a long way to go.
Can I add something on that?
Yeah.
I mean, Kang, I think you rightly said, first, very fundamental question is, why are we going to cloud? That's one thing which every business has to determine, right? What are the drivers, what are the benefits, and what are the timelines and resources assigned to it? And if it's just like, making personal decisions like we do for buying a property, a car, or whatever, right? You don't think about doing it over and over again and say, okay, I'll buy a property and then 3 months later I'll move to another property because I didn't like it. I mean, there's an entry cost and exit cost, right? Same with the cloud selections as well. But coming back to the containerization of the applications, again, if you are taking legacy apps and I'm in a bare minimum level, you can actually go in an IaaS model and you can get a virtual machine which maps your physical machine specs in most of the cloud platforms as a pure IaaS service. Does it deliver the full value? No, it doesn't. But does it get you to the cloud? Yes, it does, right? And then from there on, you start taking incremental steps to either modernize the app or modernize the way you are hosting the app in that cloud environment, and get benefits, either lower cost, better performance, more availability, blah, 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 right? Whatever is your driver for that application. But either which way, all these paths and all these choices and options are within the cloud remit. So I would say, screen it through a business value and business risk decision-making framework, just like we'll do for a physical investment or buying a hardware, server, storage, backup frames, and take that input to determine what should be the journey. Whether it's a one big bang approach, I'll take the legacy app, I'll retire it, I'll rebuild everything in a cloud native, in a microservices, services architecture, and using function apps and whatnot, right? Depending on which cloud service provider you're using. Or I'll bring whatever I have at my home right now, the same furniture where I am in my current home, move it as is, and then incrementally update it over the next 6, 9, 12 months. So fundamentally that's the choices which are in front of us as technology leaders. And the way we will make those choices is work with our business partners to screen them from a business priority perspective as well. I mean, how critical is that app? Is something which business can actually do away with, and we do a whole re-engineering and retire the whole app. We don't need that legacy app which was coded in 1997, and it was very relevant then and was working fantastic. And I don't get me wrong, it delivered value, but hey, 20 years later, it's not the same thing, right? So that's what I think we need to think through from an architecture and engineering standpoint as well.
True. And I would like to, at this moment, ask the audience, we have a poll question. And could you please bring up the poll to the audience? Since the panelists have asked, we need to be clear about the motivation of multi-cloud. Maybe we can ask the audience, please do select one in terms of what is the benefit that really attracts you for multi-cloud. So while we are looking, while you are deliberating and answering that, I would like to move to Adrian. Adrian, how do you see multi-cloud and containerization?
So I really love what Vicky has shared, right? I mean, Vicky, we should hire you into VMware because VMware exactly had the same vision. I'm not sure whether the audience has been following VMware acquisition. So from the acquisition of Heptio to the recent acquisition of Bitnami, then to Pivotal recently, the founders of Kubernetes, there was three founders, including Joe Beda. Two of them left Google and then set up their company called Heptio. They are now all VMware employees as our CTO for cloud native apps. Right? So what's happening right now, we believe, is the world of Kubernetes, like what Kang has mentioned. I'm born Java, by the way. I'm a Sun Microsystem employee many moons ago. So I'm born Java. So I saw the pendulum swing for the past almost 15, 20 years. And then from Java, everything went to Python, microservices, and now Kubernetes. VMware strongly believe the next middleware, not the right word, but I just use that to simplify our conversation, is going to be Kubernetes. Not any flavor of Kubernetes. It can be a VMware flavor of Kubernetes called Tanzu. It can be a Red Hat Kubernetes. It can be a AKS, EKS. It doesn't matter. But we believe that that will be the rise of containers. And interesting, coming from a company that have helped the world to move from standalone hardware to virtualized virtual machines on the hardware for you to be able to get more instances out of the hardware. We are now migrating our own virtual machines to containers because we believe that's the right thing to do. Because for Kang, for Vicky, what you have mentioned, precisely as you want to be more agile, as you want to be more cloud native, there must be a containerized platform. So to answer one of the questions that I saw, is containerization a must? Of course, it's not a must. That's why VMware gave you the two options, like what Vicky mentioned. You can choose to run virtual machines, your normal VMware vSphere on any of the IaaS, business as usual, because these are all a legacy three-tier application. You monolithic, you can't move. You don't have the capability, bandwidth, or to do the refactoring or the replatform, like what Kang mentioned, which are very expensive. You can choose to move that to cloud and then make use of the multi-cloud capabilities to do your rendering. Or you decided, come on, I have a brand new application that I want to try to understand microservices and containerization. Like what Kang you mentioned in a previous slide, where you have been in the .NET or the born in the cloud company, likes of the Grab, Shopee, and everything. Of course, they won't go through that old way, right? They'll just start right away on containerization. So this is where multi-cloud gives you the freedom to do both. And again, not trying to do more advertisement on VMware. VMware is exactly aligned to this vision that we are going to give you a common platform, a common PaaS. You can run your legacy three-tier virtual machine-based application, or you want to run your containerized cloud-native application, whether is it on-prem as a private cloud or off-prem onto the public cloud, which is called multi-cloud. In VMware definition, when we say a private cloud, it's also a multi-cloud. It means that you build your own hardware, you build your own private cloud capabilities, and that has been what we have enabled many customers. So I give an example. I mean, I won't say names. Of course, you guys can probably guess who is the largest bank in Singapore. I mean, the world digital bank in the world. I run many percentage of their workload, and all on-prem. We do, of course, we work with them to go multi-cloud, but the percentage of their on-prem workload is probably 1,000 to 1, 900 to 1. And the reason why is because they have done the economics that the on-prem, running on-prem containers and running on-prem virtual machines, they run it better than any of the hyperscalers, because they don't have to pay, the cost of managed services. Right? Because they have the capability, they have the skill, they have the people, they have the skill set. Therefore, they're running their own Amazon, they're running their own Azure, they're running their own Google on-prem. Thanks, Winston.
Thanks, Adrian. And we will come to the poll answers later on. And there are certain points which Adrian has highlighted will be interesting. But let's have a presentation from Tan Mui Cheng. And Tan Mui Cheng comes from Fujitsu Asia. She's the head of cloud practice. She's going to give us the talk about decentralization. And that will be a good segue to the second half of our discussion. Mui Cheng, it's up to you.
Hey, thanks, Winston, and hi, everyone. So I'm Mui Cheng, and I actually head out the cloud services for Fujitsu Asia. I guess just now earlier, we heard from the panelists that multi-cloud decentralized something that is essential for the digital transformations, is essential for the agile business. But having said that, we also heard from the panelists about the challenges that they face when moving to multi-cloud, because you actually have the data that have a different natures, you have the data that need to be able to talk to each other. How do we integrate seamlessly? So I'm going to take the next 10-15 minutes to even share with you in terms of how do we really tackle decentralized challenges for this kind of ideal agile architecture. So just take a look at some of the data, right? In the survey, sometimes in 2018, we're talking about the Couchbase survey. And then we're also saying that 64% say that they have less than 4 years to complete a digital transformations, or they may go out of business. I think that is something that is essential to even think of where your business is heading to, and how can IT supports and how the digital transformations help you to bring your business to the next stage. And that's actually from the Gartner's in this cloud adoptions usage study, which actually saying that 86% of the market has a cloud first. And why is it essential on the cloud first, on the cloud foundation? It actually forms these foundations to enable the digital strategy because of the scalability and because even the speed to the market. I think that's essential why multi-cloud was a consideration whenever we talk about digital transformation. Last but not least, there is also a survey from the Gartner. 81% of the organization using cloud data management technically have more than 2 cloud providers. And what does it mean is that multi-cloud is actually the new norm for data analytics. And in fact, technologies such as IoT, analytics, big data, coupled with the digital industrial solutions are the one that really enable decentralization. But of course, we heard even from the panelists, there's always some challenges about decentralization. It's typically the cloud integrations, which can kind of like pose this kind of challenge, and including that causing the high cost as well as the risk. So the question is always to the market, is decentralization the right model, or do we need to go back to the centralization kind of environments? There's actually no one size that fits all. In fact, companies will need to consider what's important to them and factors such as the corporate environments, their strategy, priorities, as well as the market dynamics. For example, decentralization will make sense if a company prioritizes internal responsiveness, the speed to the markets that require. But if a company business operation require more focus on reliability, compliance, then there is where a centralized strategy will be more appropriate. But we know that multi-cloud, the decentralized, will help to bring the business to the next stage. But what is it essential is really to how can we optimize the cost at the same time, reduce the risk that you need to run a hybrid or even a multi-cloud environments. In fact, I part them into 3 different buckets. earlier on Vicky has shared, multi-cloud is like you're not going to move house. If you like you're buying a house, you're not going to move house every 3 months. I think it's important. The first thing is to determine the strategy. What is the right workloads to put into the right cloud platform? And that is strategies that you need to determine, and how do the business align to the market dynamics, and what is essential and what you need for the cloud platforms to help you enable your business. Secondly is the architecture. Kang actually shared about how can we seamlessly align and integrate all these data integration so that they can talk to each other, be it whether it's a traditional workload or even in the cloud native kind of workload. So that's essential to determine the right architectures for the environments on the multi-cloud. Last but not least, we always know that cost is a challenge when we're talking about multi-cloud, because you're actually running in a different environment. The skill set of people that you need to train, the skill set of people that you need to beef up in order to manage this kind of different platform. And you're talking about running in a hyperscaler cloud, running on-prem cloud, the skill set, everything different. How can we effectively manage all these things while we are talking about a lot of OpEx model, consumption model? You're going to pay whatever you use. So these are the 3 categories you put into the different buckets, and perhaps the next steps I'm going to share with you in terms of how Fujitsu comes in place with our technology partners, in the likes of the VMware, we'll be able to help you in this kind of a 3 strategy. We talk about the strategy of connected platform, and in fact, just to share, in fact, Fujitsu actually have the end-to-end kind of a solution. If you're looking at the industrial level, and just now earlier I shared, in terms of IoT, in terms of analytics, it's driven by some of these digital business and including some of the industrial solution. Different organization, different industrial will have a need, will have a different needs for their industrial solutions to help their business, whether from the finance or is it from the manufacturing. They have a different needs on their corporate application or even on their mobile apps and things like that. And within it, what does it, the platform, be it whether from the structured data to a semi-structured data or even to unstructured data. Those are the essential things that Fujitsu have the services and capabilities to help you to onboard. And last but not least, the different cloud environments, the different cloud platforms to help you to move this industrial as well as the data into the right cloud environments. Fujitsu itself, we do have our Fujitsu local cloud platform. I think that's more essential for customers who actually want to have a data sovereignty. They want to have more local data to sit into, and that's where Fujitsu local cloud platform comes in play, a more customizable solutions for those customers that it needs for the data sovereignty. And then we also embrace with the VMware's cloud, and these were in the partnerships with like VMware, that we have the VNCs on AWS, the VMware cloud solutions on Azure, and we also in the partners with AWS as well as Microsoft Azure, because of the skill that they have, because all the engineering efforts that they have. So all in all, depending on what is the applications that you need sit on top, and this is where we have the solution with our transformation framework that we can deliver to the customers, as well as a partnership with all the technology partners that we have in place. And then next, we are talking about architectures, and we are talking about, effectively, how can the workload portability? It really depends on the well-defined application architecture. Earlier on, like I say, Kang have mentioned on the panelists, how can we integrate all the data? How can we talk to each other? And then with the technology that we embrace with VMware, in the likes like the VMware clouds, technically, can you really go into very cloud native with Google, AWS, and Microsoft, or even the Oracle Cloud? I think that's actually one of the key things why we also embrace the VMware Cloud. And that allows you to have some of this corporate workload on the portability to accelerate your hybrid journey if you actually want to make use or optimize into next generation applications in the hyperscaler cloud. The second option is workload portability is really how do you optimize your estate. To manage the right platforms as well as the workload, essential automation, orchestration, optimization is essential. So last but not least, on the modernization, and we are talking about new application, the new way, the new transformation, the re-platform, re-modernizations on all these applications. So all in all, accelerate, optimize, and utilize of the next generation application, essentially, the integrated cloud platform management will help you to achieve this workload portability. And the design of this architecture is essential, and you will really need some of the software-defined data center, which are popular for the workload portability across the multi-cloud environment. And last but not least, we are looking at more effective management. After you move on to the right workloads, it's not just the end of your transformation journey. You're going to stay with the cloud platform, for a couple of years before you look at your whole dynamics of the markets, before you look at how the business changes to tweaks accordingly to the market's needs. There's actually three components we are looking at effective management. The first thing is really optimization. While you're actually moving into the multi-cloud, and we are talking about all this decentralization, right? Yes, it actually helps the business agility, but yet this our nature pose a challenge of the cost. How do you essentially make sure that you're actually optimizing your usage? For example, if you actually move to a hyperscaler cloud and you're talking about the on-demand subscriptions and you're looking at your cost at the end of the month, how do you make sure that you're actually putting the right data into the right storage environments and to effectively manage your cost from that perspective? And of course, Fujitsu came in place with all the technology partners. We have the skill set and professional service, to help you to look at this analysis with the tools that we have, the skill set that we have, to be able to give you the recommendation. How can you optimize your workload in the different clouds environment? In the middle, you're going to see observability, and we're talking about your data is actually in the various clouds environment, but how can you from the application layers and gain some visibility up to the infra layer, which are the ones that having the performance issue, or which are the ones that we can fine-tune in order to meet your end user experience. And observability with the application performance monitoring that we have and the skill set professional service that we put in place, we'll be able to help some the customers or even partners to gain this visibility in your estate. And last but not least, we always talk about security. And security is always tied very hand in hand when we're talking about the cloud journey. And that's because it's the different layers of the defense that you need to put in place when you're talking about multi-cloud. How do you secure your data with the policy driven? Based on the compliance and based on the policy that you need, there's always certain customization according to the different set of industry, different organization needs. So all in all, I just want to sum up in order whether to do a centralization versus a decentralization model. We know that decentralization will help to accelerate business, but what is essential is to overcome the challenge. And these are the three steps that typically when we actually work customers, embrace it with the co-creations with the partners, and we help the customers to bring about to overcome this challenge and minimize the risk. Just to recap, the strategy, you need to build a connected platform, as well as you need to look in architecture. How can you effectively have the workload portability across the platform? Last but not least, effective manage it based on the three categories of optimization, observability, and to secure your entire estate of the data security. To take away, I think bringing simplicity, maximize the benefits, and mitigate the risk for you to embrace your decentralized and multi-cloud environment will help you to bring your business to the next level. And with that, that's end my sharing sessions. And in fact, perhaps I pass it on to Winston, and if there's anything that I can address in the chat groups, I think I'm more than happy to do so. Winston, over to you.
Thank you, Mu Cheng. It was great, and I think that sets the pace for the second half. And I think a lot of the questions are already coming through from the audience, which I will go through some of them, which sort of reiterates what Mu Cheng has actually presented. But going back to the poll, could we have the results of the poll? I'd like to see what motivates our audience to look at multi-cloud. Okay, so optimizing workloads across different cloud platforms is still a majority do like it, while we have optimizing cost and performance, which is very interesting because I had mixed conversations about multi-cloud, whether it can actually optimize cost in the long term. So maybe I'll throw it to Vicky and Kang. How do you see the results? Vicky first. Yeah.
Thanks, Winston. And first of all, I'm, meeting your framework around management, architecture, and strategy was amazing. I think that's the right way to look at it. And thanks for your slides. I'm very impressed. So yeah, I mean, talking about the benefits, right? I think the majority work group, and I was also looking at some of the questions which are in the Q&A tab as well, are focused on optimizing workload for different clouds, right? And that's what I started at the beginning. Each cloud partner has a inherent strength or unique value proposition, even though the rest of the platforms are very similar to each other, right? They still have some uniqueness about handling the storage better, handling the access speed better, whatever, and giving more redundancy, lower cost. So I do think that's from an enterprise perspective, as on the buyer side of the technologies, right? I definitely look at that as my prime criteria. Like, where does my workload optimize, and how does it perform, and cost? What's the associated cost of it? To me, those are the top two things, right? Of course, don't want to get stuck into a sourcing situation as well. That's always always a watch out, right? You don't want to get into a situation where you're over relying on one partner, and then you are not able to kind of mitigate that risk which the partner may bring to your business. So that's also another factor which people frequently think about while making the choices on this.
Thank you. Just want to slightly change that question. There was a question from the audience talking about data lineage across different clouds, so in a multi-cloud environment. When you're talking about optimizing workloads for different clouds, how do you ensure data lineage is protected? And to what extent could we stop unauthorized access or usage? Or is that really difficult at this moment?
I think it's a very good question, and I think that's one also of the reason why I think one should be super cautious to put too many things in different clouds, because that's where you start to kind of disrupt things like audit trails and so forth that you would set up in a unique cloud environment. I think if you really have the case of these of having to have multi-cloud environments, there are different things that you can try to do to mitigate, I would say, the security aspect in the security risk over multiple cloud. First, from an architecture point of view, is I guess to see how you can try to build by domains your cloud strategy, saying, okay, this kind of domain would go there, this kind of domain would go there, so that actually it's still easier actually to control the flow of data, so that data doesn't flow in all cases. Another approach I think is also necessary is actually to re-emphasize on the centralization of logs, that you can actually, whether you have one or multiple clouds, you can actually decide to centralize all your logs in a same place. Obviously, you won't have all the same integration with the tools that can analyze, for example, if you use AWS natively, then you can have some more audit trails plugged on, but I think it also gives some perspective. And then maybe, but this one I'm less today familiar with, but in the presentation of Mui-Cheng, there seems to be some solutions which from a security point of view can span also over multiple clouds. But just looking at the results of this survey, I must say I'm still quite surprised, because I fear that there is a bit of a tendency of the tech community to look for a quest of perfection, to always say, okay, I want to take the best of multiple clouds, to optimize, as you said, the cost, because I'm going to choose between each to make some cherry picking. And again, I think when you look at it, even with one cloud provider, there is a lot to optimize, and actually most of the things you can do everything with one cloud before you start to say, okay, I don't have enough services. The topic of FinOps is how you actually optimize even the workload in one cloud by being smart about how do you bring up instances dynamically and so forth. I would say that looking at the survey, I have the feeling that sometimes lots of people are trying to look at too much perfection, whereas I think that sometimes you need to be very pragmatic and say, okay, let's skill up first on one cloud and be very good at it first, and then we'll see if there's other things to look at.
Thank you, thank you. And Adrian, I'd like to ask, extend on what Kang was saying in terms of optimizing one cloud and then looking at other clouds. How do you make such skill set and knowledge portable? How are you as a solution provider making this possible? Because that is always a challenge. Cloud engineers are most expensive. Second to security developers, is very difficult to get them. Probably you're poaching some of them from the user community and vice versa, it's going on. So how do you make it portable? How do you make it easy?
No, so Vincent, before I go to that, I just want to bring up one important point, like what Kang and Vicky mentioned about going to cloud is not about all rosy, all cheaper, all better, all greatest, right? But it's also about what Vicky mentioned on operation. I'll come to that, is linking back to the question that you just asked. Again, I can't mention names, but you all can make it up. So the largest shoemaker in the world, that starts with an N, 4-letter, you know, yeah. Of course, they moved to the cloud so that everyone can, and on VMC on AWS, right? And of course, they can do a lot of wonderful stuff, because now you can order a pair of Air Jordan, customize your name, change your color, and ship to your home, right? And that can only all happen when you have a very powerful e-commerce portal. But in order to optimize the cost, what did the customer do? They actually, different instances, different location, during the daytime, or I would say maybe during the evening time where there's a lot of activity, they kept the workload to run the e-commerce. During the downtime, they took the workload accommodate to do data mining. So nothing changed at the cloud, everything is the same, but it's actually the operation part of how you optimize and then how you save costs, because it's like running utility bills, right? You can choose to run on your lights all day long, on your air conditioner all day long, or you can choose to on it 8 hours a day. So coming back to your question, Winston, is yes, it's true that at this current junction, we do not have a lot of cloud native architects. But however, if you look at the push from VMware or Google or many of Microsoft or any of the big multinational tech companies, like even VMware ourselves have committed to train 1,000 right people in Singapore as part of SG United, free of charge, to give you some entry level of Kubernetes. 8 weeks course, free of charge online. I think the community is coming to help, to chip in. Secondly, is that if you were to talk to any undergraduates, which of course VMware, we hire a lot of undergraduates or fresh grad, I would say, internship, and we train them so that they can be a part of the team. They will want to learn Java. They will want to learn .NET. They want to learn Python. They want to learn Cassandra, MongoDB, and things like that, because the new world is all about new tech. So I'm really not so concerned about the talent pool, because over a period of time, the talent pool will be there. But the question is now. So how do you solve the problem now? That's why, coming back to what I've just shared on our multi-cloud, where you are able to manage your containers and your virtual machines, whether it's on-prem or on-cloud. And I'm sure if you go to the market today, a lot of people, if not anything else, are very, very familiar with this management tool called vCenter. I'm sure you have tons of engineers that are certified and know how to use vCenter. The same tool that we are going to, that you have been using it for the past 20 years, it's going to be the same tool that you're going to use to manage your workload on the cloud. So that is, of course, that is not ideal. That's transitional. But as the talent pool builds up, I think that would be a very nice transition. So this is where I hope I've answered the question from the attendees. But I think this is a balance, right? From operation to competency, and many things for you to really go and think of when, of course, every organization is different. But I think the whole environment and the whole community is actually very ready for this transition to happen.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Adrian. And I would like to hit on or end with a subject matter which is obviously always interesting, which is security. But maybe I'll go straight to Vicky first. Vicky, we always talk about data security and how we have to reimagine when it comes to cloud security. But now we are moving to multi-cloud, where data might reside in different places if you don't have a centralized data infrastructure. So from your perspective, how different is cloud security versus multi-cloud security?
Sure. And thanks, Winston. I was about to say that I see a lot of questions on security, and we didn't talk a lot about security because, any new journey we embark on, right, and putting systems from on-prem to single cloud, multi-cloud, or even partner clouds, right, whatever you define your transformation. Security is very, very important and essential consideration in making the right choices, making the right architecture choices, putting in the right level of controls around the data, around the access, right? Some of the cloud service providers are actually, almost all of them are providing it out of box, some native capabilities, but then you still fall short. Then you can bring in additional layers of control and additional layers of protection through things like MFAs and restricted access and like that. To me, doing it on single cloud versus multiple cloud it's a little bit more complex, yes, but it's not very different. You still focus on protecting the data, whether it's hosted in on-prem, hosted on cloud, or hosted across multiple clouds. And the fact is, with the way the data world is exploding right now, and the businesses are going after collecting data from all the partners, different parts of the supply chain, sales, commercial processes, there will be distributed data in sets for any business, any scalable, complex, large business, right? And any growing business. They will have market level data, they will have process level data, they will have partner level data. So you will not be able to protect it in the old ways by putting all of them in one data center and putting a security guard and a log book there and saying anybody comes in should sign in there and check out and check in from my data center. Gone are those days. I mean, if you think you can do that, you're living in an illusion. So I would suggest, focus on your critical data, protect them. It doesn't matter where it resides. Protect the access to that data, and also the integration back to your core platforms was the 2 points where there's maximum amount of attack and potential surface area for attack and threats coming up. But it's always a catch-up game. We last 6 months or so, and again taking Adrian's clues, we are not naming anyone here, but they are a partner assets in which are hosted in our infrastructure, and not my company, in organizations infrastructure, and they were compromised 3-6 months ago, and attacks unfolded later, right? So there has the sophistication of attacks and the way things are coming up is all new. We all need to continuously learn and adapt around it, and stay focused on protecting the data and protecting the connectivity back to your core enterprise systems, irrespective of where you're hosting it.
Thank you, Vicky. A quick one, Kang, agree, disagree, or do you have, you want to add something more to that?
Yeah, no, I would overall agree. And what I would add, I think, is that overall, anyway, I think that the security of the cloud is much higher than what we all have in all our companies on premise. Because actually, whether AWS, Azure, or cloud, or Google Cloud, they have much more security engineers than any, I would say, companies which is managing its own data center. So I'd say it's a debate, but not so much a debate. But I think the big debate is more, as we see more and more IoT in the market, it's the security at the edge, because there will be a lot of equipment which will not be secured. For example, in hotels, when you start to install, or hotels want to install, some contactless devices and so forth, with so many providers on the market, startups and so forth, which may not have the right level of security. I think that's where the real changes is going to be lying is more security at the edge than within the cloud infrastructure itself, as Vicky is saying.
Thank you, Kang. Before I move to Adrian, I just want to highlight that we have actually selected the best question from our audience. Thank you for all the questions. We really appreciate it. And it is actually goes to, so far for this session, is Paul Locke's data lineage question, which actually got a lot of our panelists' brain juices working quite a bit. So thank you for that. And we will be in touch with you, Paul, on the prizes. Now, coming to Adrian, you have seen the discussion and we are ending on security. We have around 1 minute. So quick thoughts, how VMware is addressing multi-cloud security.
So like what Vicky and Kang have mentioned, right? It's all about the connectivity, right? So we were in the panelist chat. I talk about the rise of SD-WAN, right? Of course, VMware again understand customer needs, and that's why we acquired this company called VeloCloud, the #1 SD-WAN company in the world. We've done a lot of rapid deployment. Not sure whether Accor or Coca-Cola is our customer. I think we are. I think we are partners in there. But what we have done is when you connect, to give the analogy of a drawbridge, right? Today, because plus this pandemic, everyone is working from home. We are in a castle right now where the drawbridges have to be lowered for business to continue. We used to protect the crown jewel, the fortress, because we protect our data center because it's business as usual, right? But now in this pandemic time, in order for the business to work, everyone has to work from home. Means we are lowering down all the drawbridges. It's not one drawbridge, we're talking about thousands of drawbridges. So the access control, the guard at every drawbridge of how you actually do access control is actually all about the internet traffic, the network traffic, the VPNs of the world, SSL, and go on the whole list. So in order to simplify this, even when you are going to a cloud and therefore cloud coming back to home or home going to a data center, like what Kang, Vicky has mentioned, your assets, then it's the rise of software-defined wide area network. You can't go back to traditional networking, not only about cost. Of course, you can do all your lease line. If you have hundreds of millions of dollars to go to a telco and buy trunks and trunks of lease line, of course, that's even safer, but it's not practical, right? And yet to go routing all data through just pure internet, I think the risk is too high. So the need for us to have security and SD-WAN all as one conversation. This year will be a big one of SASE. I don't think we have enough time to talk about SASE. This year will be a big year of SASE. But coming back to just connectivity and security, it's important you look at it as one conversation. Second point is about then the speed and the latency to the cloud. Again, that is where you will again need SD-WAN, because I mean, of course, I pitch for my own VeloCloud, but there are many other alternatives you have in the market. The need for you to have premier service or this word called fast connect to the nearest availability zone of the hyperscaler through SD-WAN is where we will route to you to the the nearest point, right? So I know I'm short of time. I mean, I don't know how we're going to take this forward, but please do reach out to us, because this itself is another 1 hour conversation, right? Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Winston.
Thanks, Adrian, and thanks for the audience for taking part. Bisham Kishani, we have who's the Chief Technology Officer for Public Cloud at JPAC in Palo Alto Networks. We're going to have a quick fireside chat, and the topic here is rethinking security for agile businesses. Keeping in mind that the theme for today's Digi-Live is data and cloud. So maybe we can start off, Bisham. How has the pandemic changed the security equation?
Thanks, first of all, Vincent, for having me on this session. Super excited to share some of my thoughts, what we have been seeing on the field. And I'm actually I'm going to try and correlate to some of the questions which have been coming up. In fact, Nelson had something around this first question, which you're actually raising. So we all know that when we hit this unprecedented times, almost overnight, thousands of employees of every organization had to start working from home. And one of the biggest challenges that customers started, facing during that time was, how do I give them access? Because a lot of organizations still didn't provide laptops from the day-to-day perspective for the employees or the users. And overnight now, they were actually starting to work from home. The second challenge which customers started facing was, shortage of these equipments, because I still know certain countries where laptops are still taking 4 to 6 weeks to get delivered. And that's when people started moving into a BYOD related, framework, I would basically say. Building security framework around that again was a challenge. Third was, applications are everywhere. We have been discussing this for an hour. It's on private data centers, public clouds, SaaS services which are being consumed. And initially, everyone was trying to get all the employees to come in to the private data center and hairpinning traffic outside, which was further putting strain onto the bandwidth and capacity. So these were some of the biggest challenges which the customers facing from accessibility point of view. At the same time, to keep the services up and running, you need to be in the data center, right? And when you can't go to the data centers, or you have servers which have gone down and you had a replacement and the replacements are not coming in because the shipments are slowed down or not happening, that was another challenge. And that actually fueled the cloud adoption more, because that's where the IT started consuming cloud by doing a lift and shift, which we call it, onto the public cloud. So these are some of the things which we actually saw on the field.
Do you see a lot of people actually doing lift and shift, or did they, because there was a huge push towards refactoring a lot of legacy applications, but do you see that has changed the mentality because of all the security questions around it?
So there are two things around that. So there are certain set of customers who are adopting lift and shift. Okay, and I think Adrian made some of the points where VMware actually gives them a platform to help them do a lift and shift initially, test the waters, and then start consuming that. Second part is there was a question around containers, which I think Hing raised, that should I move to cloud only for containers? Right, a lot of these applications, first of all, are being rewritten into the newer, frameworks, microservices based architecture. And when you're doing that, you are looking at smaller footprints of compute, or the next generation, compute, which we actually call, which is containers and serverless frameworks, because they are, very, very fast, very, very agile. And this is where, once you move into the legacy stuff and you start rewriting these legacy applications into the smaller applications or smaller footprints, I would basically say, that's when you start consuming these newer set of computes.
Okay. And other areas from your conversations with your clients, do you see any gaps or glaring gaps as people were rushing towards digitalization and putting in BYOD policies where there were no BYOD policies and giving access to SaaS applications?
Yeah, so one of the biggest glaring gaps, which actually, almost everyone hit, was people had data centers, multiple data centers, the DCDR kind of stuff, someone running active, someone running active passive. But no one visualized that overnight, 100% of the users, or maybe 90% of the users, are now starting to work from home. And the networking portion and the security around it was the biggest challenge, which actually came and hit them hard. Okay, and that was one of the questions which Nilsson asked, right? How do you actually go about building a uniform security framework? So this is where SASE actually plays a very, very important role, right? Because while there was a huge influx of applications towards the cloud, which basically handle the compute portion, but how do you actually build a uniform security framework, or I typically call it as an umbrella of security for any device accessing any kind of applications which could be consumed from private data centers or public clouds, or from public cloud, again, it could be IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS. You still have the same uniform framework. And this is where an umbrella level security comes in. And that also needs to be scalable, because like we had customers who were using like roughly around 2,000 to 3,000 users in this part of the world. And suddenly overnight, they had like 20,000 users actually on a remote. So while they are onto that umbrella. We also need to gear up that our infrastructure on the back end automatically scales to handle that kind of unprecedented growth, which is actually coming in. In fact, we've gone about adopting public cloud for our SASE solution so that, we are able to give that kind of growth, to the customers when they demand it or when they require it.
Could you explain a bit more on the SASE framework, just for people who may not be clued into or might only have rudimentary knowledge of SASE?
Yeah. So it's, we used to typically talk about SD-WAN, and then we used to talk about firewall as a service. But if you look at in today's term, all these things are combined together because you don't want to hairpin all the traffic again, as I said earlier, to the private data center, because you've got applications sitting on public cloud, which is over IaaS, you've got SaaS, and you probably would have contract related applications. Now, this is where the SASE plays an important role. So you could probably have a user who's operating out of home. Now, when he's coming to private data center, he still gets the same uniform security framework, which could be probably in your private data center. The moment he's going into the public cloud area, which could be IaaS, he still gets the same because you're actually heading into the SASE environment and then going out. So you don't need to hairpin everything out here, but you still have the same uniform security framework, or whether you're going onto the SaaS side. Now, if you're onto the branch side, again, the same thing holds true. So you could have SD-WAN solutions out there from vendors, which could basically be, again, connecting into the SASE framework or the firewall as a service framework. And what happens is, again, if it has to go to the private data center, the traffic goes directly over private line onto that. If it is supposed to go to cloud or to your SaaS provider, it's just going to go to that security framework out there and then going on to out there. So you get much better performance. Okay, you have a uniform security framework and you don't need to bother about what kind of devices they're using, because you basically build a security framework which is agnostic to where the applications are residing, what kind of devices you're using, what kind of infrastructure you're using. It's completely taken care.
Okay, and just to give context on the SASE for our audience, what is SASE actually designed to actually is good for, and in what situations is it an overkill or may not be the right appropriate situation? Answer, sorry.
I think personally, I feel it's designed for almost every scenario, specifically in today's world, right? Because we have been discussing, right? Almost 95% of customers are on a multi-cloud journey. When you are in a multi-cloud journey, you have to relook at the security. Okay, you cannot adapt to the same traditional security framework what has been going around for decades.
Okay, so rethink your security framework and see how solutions like SASE can play in that framework. That's a very good segue to a key question, which actually came from a discussion that I had with a few interviewees before this, is the problem of cloud configuration. This cloud configuration or poor cloud configuration has been one of the biggest issue where there has been a lot of security breaches. So how do you actually address this from a solution provider perspective?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, we need to understand that security on a cloud varies. Okay, when I say varies, depending upon the different services which you're consuming from the cloud provider. Okay, so if you're consuming IaaS, your security is much lesser compared to a SaaS, right? In SaaS, the responsibility of security onto the application provider or the SaaS application provider is much higher compared to a cloud service provider who's providing you IaaS services. Now, it's a shared security model, right? Remember that it is not the ownership of the CSP. It is a shared security model. That means we as a customer need to make sure that we understand that in depth and figure out where the demarcation point comes, where the CSP finishes his or her responsibility and where we start our responsibility. That needs to be understood. Now, I think Kang made a very good point. The security on CSP is much higher compared to what we would have actually done onto a data center, because these guys have a battalion or an army of people who are actually looking at that. So from the infra related point of view, they've taken care of things. So like if there is an infra level DDoS attack happening, they'll basically take care of that. But when you are building that infra on top of it, it is important that you're building the right security framework, circling around it. Because if you're going to leave like your security groups open, or you're going to basically not put the right IAM policies, then it's something which is the responsibility of the customer. The other things which are happening is, why are customers adopting public cloud? Obviously, you have a great amount of next generation technology, you have infinite amount of resources out there, but at the same time, agility is one of the biggest things. Okay, but when you get all these things coming in, you need to make sure that security is a business enabler. It doesn't actually pull you down. And on cloud, it has to be automated, not only in cloud today, even on the private side, with customers adopting SDN frameworks out there with maybe VMware NSX, Cisco ACI frameworks, and all those things. So when you have that, the security needs to be automated, and security needs to be baked in with the developers when they're actually provisioning their infra out there. Because today an infra on the public cloud is also being provisioned by using infrastructure as a code. That means your security needs to be baked in, so that when the infra is being built, okay, the security is going part of it.
So when you say security needs to be baked in, are you alluding towards models like DevSecOps?
Yes, very much. And the reason I'm saying that is, again, it's a very broader topic, but I'll basically take a real life example, which really happened just a couple of weeks or 3 weeks back. We all heard about the supply chain attack, the SolarWinds attack, right? It's a classic case of supply chain attack. Now, how do you go about making sure that you are not the next SolarWinds? In last 3 weeks, I've had 8 customer meetings all at exec level. Between the first 10 minutes, okay, the question which comes into me is, how do I make sure I am not the next SolarWinds? Okay, and this is something which has to be thought about, because customers are adopting and consuming applications which are readily developed, or the packages which are coming in readily developed from the third-party organizations, and those are the ones which my customers are adopting, or my contractors are adopting, or we are internally building some applications which are being consumed by my own users or someone else. How do I make sure that whatever code is being written, whatever operating systems are being picked, or packages which are being picked, are not vulnerable or doesn't have any kind of porous loopholes out there which can be exploited by the attackers? Okay, so that's where the shift left approach needs to be taken. Okay, where right from the time when the developer starts picking up the operating system or packages, okay, that's where we start telling that developer that, hey, look, these doesn't meet the company guidelines, okay, and you need to fix these things before you actually go live. Not only at that level, but at different stages, these checks need to be conducted.
And how does a company actually do this when you are actually consuming a lot of SaaS products, where you do not have much control over the development or the roadmap? And a lot of the problems is not the initial code, it's the updates and the patches that creates a lot of the tools.
Yeah, so I'll break this answer into 2 parts. So when you are completely onto the SaaS environment, then obviously, as I said, the security responsibility at the SaaS providers level is very, very high. Okay, but let's look at, if you've got certain set of applications which are customized, which are actually going to be integrated to using an API framework into the SaaS SaaS service provider, then that application can go through a complete DevOps methodology. At the same time, what the most of the customers today, okay, at least the larger SaaS provider, they definitely have these things. Okay, but you could probably have a discussion with them as to try to understand as to what is their methodology of making sure that they are taking care of this whole pipeline process, or basically building a zero trust framework out there to make sure that their softwares are completely safeguarded. In fact, early this week, MAS actually came up with the guidelines around it. It was published in the Straits Times as to how each financial organization needs to work with their vendors, and also make sure that they themselves are taking care of the whole API-based security as well as DevOps-based security.
And it's based on the concept of zero trust, right?
Yeah. So again, if you look at zero trust, it's a framework, right? It's a methodology, and it's up to you. How do you start, picking different components and start building onto that? Now, for last few years, what I have been seeing is most of the customers, when they're starting to build the zero trust framework, they have been predominantly or traditionally looking at data, workloads, devices, network, people, application, but application access point of view. They haven't really gone into depth as to, how do I make sure that I'm building the application and the code around it, okay, in the right manner. And this is where, again, the zero trust needs to be looked into. So this particular portion also needs to be added into your complete grand strategy, which I typically call it, because you have a grand strategy to stop the breaches, and then you have a strategy to basically go about putting your guidelines around it, right? So this is where this also needs to be embedded into your zero trust architecture or a framework.
Thanks. I'd like to move to the human element of security, and that's basically the security teams and the talent that you already have in an organization. A lot of security teams tends to be seen as innovation hurdles or innovation killers. You do not want to send, you do not want a CISO to look through your idea until it's more or less baked. But do you see that changing? Do you see that mindset changing? And do you see CISOs becoming more collaborative and as an enabler?
Yes. So as I said at the start, security has to be an enabler. Okay, it cannot be a bottleneck, and that's the reason automation needs to be adapted on security, right? And in today's time, most of the organizations have different set of teams. You'll have a networking team, you'll have a compute team, you'll have DevOps team, obviously compliance and risk governance team, and then cloud infra team. These teams need to come together, because end of the day, the objective is very clear, to make sure that business to be successful, right? Unless you go about adopting the next generation security by automating security, you would not be able to become an enabler, okay? Because the moment you move on to cloud, okay, the DevOps is going to flood multiple logical data centers onto public cloud. Now, you cannot go and tell them that I'm not going to make your application live till the time you get a go ahead from me, which is going to take 1 week or 10 days. I need to make sure that I build a security framework in such a manner which is automated and gets embedded into the infra which they are actually building through the DevOps methodology. And that will take care of things.
Okay. Oh, we have a question for one last question for the rest of the time. In summary, for the audience, could you highlight some key recommendations based on what you have actually spoken to your customers?
Yeah. So, we did discuss about the multi-cloud. I think Vicky raised some great points around it. Kang had, some great points around the single. So one of the biggest thing is customers are definitely adopting multi-cloud. 9 out of 10 customers I meet, they're on a multi-cloud environment. And the biggest challenge for them is security, operations, compliance, governance, risk. So for doing all these things, the first and foremost important stuff for any customer to understand is, how do I get visibility into that? If you don't have visibility, you are actually shooting in the dark, and you're going to have a lot of misses and one hit only, right? But the other side, they're going to have multiple hits and probably maybe one miss. So you need to look at solutions which can actually help you, adopt multi-cloud environment. So like if you look at Gartner reports, Gartner is talking about CNSP, that is a cloud native security platform, which can actually work agnostic manner across a multi-cloud infrastructure, not only help you with visibility, but helps you with compliance, governance, risk management, and build an automated security framework on your multi-cloud environment. Adapt Cloud, it's a fantastic thing. Gives you a lot of agility, a lot of flexibility, a lot of great tools. Not only what the CSPs are building, but the CSP marketplace is offering. You've got the best of stuff out there. The only thing is, adopt these kind of tool sets which actually enable your business, make security an enabler to take you guys to the next level.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Your views has been really excellent. Thank you. And I think the audience would have learned a lot. And I would invite the audience, if you have any further questions, please, you can either send it to me or get in touch with Bisham, and I'm sure he will give you his insights and wisdom. Thank you.